BC Racing is like the XXR of the suspension community because if you go out onto any forum, it's an absolute war zone. By the time I got done writing the script, I feel like I had a deeper receding hairline for the amount of stress I had to go through to get this information. So Quan Enterprises was founded in Nantou in 1999. Now, this is where it gets very confusing just right out of the gate because BC Racing has different subsidiaries and different divisions depending on the region that you're in. Don't be confused because there's another BC Racing out there, but BC does not stand for Bob Conlon. It stands for whatever I just said. I don't even remember. Bob Chuan? Bor Chuan. Originally, Bor Chuan just was founded on making shock absorbers and auto parts because in Taiwan they needed to have some sort of to get into the automotive community because in 1999 and just the late 90s, the automotive industry was booming. You had a lot of parts that people needed to make, and Taiwan was coming into the international market in terms of a parts supplier at a relatively low cost. So BC was founded to essentially fill that gap. It wasn't until in the later years after BC had started to get a little bit of money underneath them that they really started to dive into more sophisticated suspension components. BC kept making money until they had enough in their wallet to eventually make their own product. And in 2003, they did just that. They introduced the BC Coilover kit, which was at the time a pretty revolutionary way to buy a coilover kit at a relatively low cost. And because they were made in Taiwan, because they were made overseas, you didn't have to worry about that high profit or cost that you really would get at any sort of local made mom and pop shop. On top of that, a year later, they eventually came over to the United States of America, and that's where BC really started to take off because you never want to underestimate an American's ability to search for a product at the lowest price possible because we're all cheap. Don't be fooled. Just because something was cost effective doesn't mean that it was bad. BC hit the market and they took off running. And even in the early 2003s, 2004s, there was a lot of competition in the suspension community, but because BC hit the market at where they did, they took off and nobody really knew how or why. So the company just continued to get bigger, and when they ended up just going from shock absorbers to automotive parts, they started to get more and more involved in just aftermarket suspension components and coilover kits as a whole. And just like the trap in Indiana Jones, the rock just kept rolling faster and bigger and it just couldn't be stopped. BC continued to just acquire other companies overseas, like warehousing and shipping and exporting companies, so that they continued to make products that they could ship overseas and make a killing on. Now, by 2008-ish, there were about 50 million new dollar Thailand. New Thailand dollar. What is it? In 2008, they acquired up to 50 million in new Taiwan dollar. Sounds like a lot, right? It's $1.8 million. Not so surprising now, is it? BC had a lot of accreditation. There's way too many C's and D's in that word. BC Racing was accredited with a lot of awards leading up to 2008 and to the current year. They were held to the Golden Peaks Award. They were held to a whole bunch of Best Companies in Taiwan Award. They held just all sorts of stuff were happening for BC Racing because they were making good products, and the company itself was, well, not bad. They were a good company to work for. They held their employees very well, and they just did what they had to do to continue making as much money as possible without being an In fact, they were doing so good that in 2010 they just decided, why don't we make wheels too? Damn, they had enough money to just start their own forged wheel company. I wish I was that cool. In 2010 they launched BC Forged, which was a company that specialized in two-piece wheels and now to this day three-piece wheels. You would be shocked at how long it took for me to realize that BC Forged and BC Coilovers were the same company. I honestly wasn't even making that up. I actually found that out this morning. And this is where BC Racing's name really starts to get difficult because just like any other entry-level or affordable option, the company is held to a lot of criticism and speculation. BC Racing makes a lot of components for a lot of different vehicles, whether you're looking at the BR series or an older variant, or you're looking for something for your M3. Because the price was so affordable and just cost efficient, people just were really kind of, well, scared. People that have ran them loved them. People that have never ran them hate them. People that ran them and then upgraded to something different were like, meh, whatever. We believe that a lot of the speculation and criticism comes from the fact that BC Racing does private label their suspension components, meaning that they sell to other companies that will relabel BC's work and make it their own label. Now, because of how the whole private label company works, you can be held to a little bit of criticism because you just never know what other products are associated with BC Racing. So we don't know if it's Megan or if we don't know if it's Tane. We don't know who it is, but at the same time, if you're gonna private label to make a little extra cash, you gotta expect that there's gonna be some people a little curious as to what other companies are running that same exact coil or spring, especially if you're looking at a price point that BC Racing is at. But for what BC makes, they are not a bad coilover. They make make affordable coilovers for what you need. They have customizable spring rakes with Swift springs. You can go with different things, different that, customize this, customize that. BC Racing does a good job, and there's a reason that BC is probably one of the most popular coilovers to date right now when it comes to building, well, probably your first or second car. And that's not to say that they don't have higher end applications as well, because they do. In fact, they don't actually add any sort of bro tax onto their higher end coilovers like an M3 or an M4 product, like pretty much everybody else does. BC Racing has some history, but they're not that old. They're really only about 20 years old, and a lot of their history stems from overseas. And because they haven't really hit that age of having heritage just yet, you're not gonna see a lot of information out there. The cool thing is that their North American division is extremely active and vocal in the automotive community. You see them on forums, on Facebook, you see them all over the place, just integrating and talking to people because that's what they know and do. Their overseas stuff is pretty quiet, but to have a 40,000 square foot facility here in North America, it seems like they're more of the voice than the original BC Racing is. I totally didn't just move this over here. So the winner of this week's video is Matthew Grosser for subscribing. Thank you so much for doing that. And on top of that, we're gonna do another one. All you have to do is actually give us an idea on what you'd like to see us cover next. So if you drop an idea on this video, you'll be entered in to win a t-shirt, and we will send you a banner. So all you have to do is comment on what you'd want us to talk about next. Please keep it automotive related. We're not gonna talk about my beard. We're not gonna talk about the fact that Mario doesn't know fancy words. We're not gonna talk about how swole A-Man is, or the fact that Jasper looks like a fluffy Elon Musk. Damn! So we hope you guys enjoyed. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. We will see you later. Peace.